Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate your being here. I'm Richard Galloway, oils consultant with the United Soybean Board, and I have with me our very own donutologist, Todd Jones. Todd has a long history in the donut industry, first with a small mom and pop donut operation, 20 years with a large donut franchise company, and now he has his own company, Interactive Entertainment. We're glad to have Todd with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
40 years he has doing donuts.
Been doing this since I was 5.
First, though, let's talk a little bit about soybean oil in general. You got to hear the whole spiel. Soybean oil is the most widely used edible oil in the United States. It's got a lot of attributes that the food industry really values. For decades, food manufacturers, food service companies have preferred the versatility, the availability, and the economics of soybean oil as their #1 use. It's adaptable to virtually every fat or oil application out there. It's the most suitable for things like salad dressings, sauces, and baked goods. It's good for food service operations, for bakeries, and packaged food manufacturers as well. It's been around a long time. We're featuring a very special soybean oil today, high oleic soybean oil. It's ideal for high heat applications like the donut frying that Todd's going to be doing. Todd, tell us a little bit about the recipe that you're using, the donuts that you're frying.
Well, the donuts that I'm frying today are going to be made with buttermilk cake donut mix. It's a very light donut mix that I prefer to use as opposed to using something with nutmeg in it. It actually melts in your mouth. If you've been at our booth, any of y'all have experienced the donuts, you can taste the difference. And this is something that I've been using for 20 years now.
Todd left out one very important fact, and that's these little donuts are only 31 calories per donut. So we encourage you to eat about 10 before you're really fully satisfied.
Well, what we say, because there are many donuts, we say mini is a new skinny, okay? Because they're portion control.
The high oleic oil that Todd's using was developed really to meet consumer wishes for better nutrition. 31 calories is not just a joke. Oil is oil. It has the same amount of calories. But this oil doesn't require hydrogenation for Todd to use it in a real high heat application. It's 375 degrees in the fryer here. So without hydrogenation, you're not adding any trans fats. At the same time, we have very heart-healthy monounsaturated fats are a main portion of this oil, and it's low in saturated fat, yet it still is a very good frying oil. Soybean oil in general, just to speak about that as a rule, it is high in what we call the good fats. That's the monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, and it's low in the bad fats, saturated fat, and no added trans fats to the diet. It's one of the most versatile cooking oils because it has a neutral flavor and it has a very high smoke point. You'd have to get up to another 100 degrees before you would start having any smoking from this particular oil. So it's very good for many applications for those reasons. Another good thing about soybeans are that they're grown over such a broad area. They're actually grown in North America on 80 million acres. It's all the way from North Dakota to North Florida, all the way from New York State to Texas. In fact, they're grown right here in Orleans County in Louisiana. So they're a ubiquitous crop in North America. And what that means for those of us in the food manufacturing business, it means that we're going to have plenty of soybean oil this year and next year and the next year. We're not likely to have shortages because of weather. We're dealing with a crop. It has to be grown. Growing conditions are uncertain, but soybeans are over such a broad area that soybean oil and other products from soy are always available. Besides the abundant supply, a large production system and transportation system has grown up around the soybean industry. Soybean plants that process soybeans range all the way from just upriver here in Destrehan, Louisiana, all the way up to South Dakota and over to Ohio and Maryland and even down 20 miles north of the Florida state line in South Georgia. So soybeans are everywhere. And what's important about that is that not a lot goes into the transportation system, into the gathering system, into all of the systems required to get a soybean from where it's grown on the farm till it's soybeans to be used in your food products, or as a consumer to be available to you in the grocery store or the restaurant. In fact, soybeans are so prevalent that we use almost 2 gallons of soybean oil in this country for every gallon of every other fat and oil. Think about that just a minute. It's everywhere. It's in everything that you use. And as a food manufacturer, the importance of that is you can get it from a lot of different suppliers, a lot of different locations, and not pay a lot of transportation costs to get it to you. Now, high oleic oil, this particular oil, has a really superior heat stability. It's developed to replace some oils that we previously hydrogenated so that we could fry with it. It can be used over an extended period of time. Last year at IFT, Todd fried donuts the entire time. And over that time, if you have experience with oil, you'll know the oil did darken. But nobody could detect any deterioration in flavor. So we had 4 days, I think.
Yes, 4 days of frying at 375 degrees. Usually when I fry with vegetable oil, the shortening, it discolors the machine. For 4 days, for 4 hours a day, it didn't discolor.
So what you get is you get polar compounds that build up on the face of the fryer, the inside of the fryer, like you do your frying pan at home. If you see that sometime, aggravates me to death. It just doesn't happen because you just don't have the unstable. That's the polyunsaturated fats that create those compounds. So those fatty acids are just not there. Why don't you talk a little more about what else you like about the oil, what your experience has been?
Well, my experience has been, since I've been making donuts for a very long time, is that when you fry the donut, you know, when you usually have a donut and you taste it, after you taste it, it has that pasty taste in your mouth. But with the soybean oil, you don't get that. And it makes the donut much more lighter, much more fluffier, and easy to digest. So, I mean, I was completely sold on it when I first used it, because I had never used it before. I used to use vegetable shortening, which was hydrogenated. And when you eat that solid, that's exactly what's going in your stomach. But with this oil here, it's a liquid. And I mean, I was as fascinated as participants that were there, because it was the first time I was using it. And because of the fact that I use this now, you know, I won't use anything else. You know, my clients, my customers, they love it. They think I did something different with the mix. It just enhanced the taste of the donuts. So I'm completely sold on it.
Thank you, Todd. Why don't you fry some up for us?
Sure.
I mentioned earlier that the real difference in this oil is the fatty acid profile. In the brochure that you have in front of you, there's a chart of all of the major oils actually, and a lot of minor oils, most of which are much more expensive than soybean oil, and many of which are only available in relatively small quantities. This high oleic soybean oil is going to be available in large quantities, yet it has a similar fatty acid profile to olive oil, none of the flavor of olive oil that you don't necessarily want in products like donuts, even though you might in a salad dressing. So it's just a very healthy solution to fatty acids and oils for pouring down rain. Besides the high oleic trait, while Todd's whipping up these donuts, speak a little bit more about other soybean oil alternatives. There are a lot of other processes that are available that allow soybean oil to be used for a lot of different food applications. One of these is simply blending. You can take a fully hydrogenated soybean oil, and full hydrogenation doesn't create any trans isomers. So there's no trans fat added to fully hydrogenated oil. That can be blended with liquid soybean oil, such as high oleic soy, maintain the high stability, but give you some crystal structure, some fat compounds that can be used in some applications like real high heat, extended heavy frying applications, and a lot of bakery applications. There's another process that's been around a long time but it's just being used in high volumes in the U.S., and that's called interesterification. Interesterification changes the melting point and melting curve of soybean oil, so it's more like a semi-solid shortening type product. And this can be used for a lot of applications like margarine, some of the hard portion or semi-soft, hard portion of semi-soft margarines, dough compounds and shortenings. And you might say this sounds a lot like hydrogenation, and really the end product that you create when you intersterify is much like partially hydrogenated oils of the past. One big difference is there are no trans fats created. It's a much more suitable product for the health consciousness, and it doesn't has no issues with the partially hydrogenated oil issues that we're dealing with right now. As you can see, there are a lot of benefits to the food manufacturing industry of soybean oil. It's a product that's readily available. It's available at very economical prices. The supply chain is very manageable. The high oleic oil, while currently only available in limited quantities, is going to be available in much larger quantities as time passes. We're dealing with a brand new crop. So when you start with a new crop, you start with a limited supply, and you grow some, and then you use some of that for seed, and you process some of it. So it's a gradual process that you build up to. So we're going to have some donuts in just a minute. I hope you see how beneficial soybean oil is. While Todd's finishing up running some of these donuts, do we have any questions? Let's go ahead and take questions from the audience, if you have any. If I can hear you over the rain. None? Yes, sir. Is there a difference between soybean and soya oil? No, same thing. Our culture tends to call it soybean oil. Other cultures tend to call it soya. Yes, ma'am.
We're going to get like funnel cakes. This is what these are going to be.
This is no indication of the veracity of what we've just told you.
How does it compare to peanut oil?
Peanut oil is an outstanding oil. In fact, historically, I've personally used it for a lot of the frying I would do, like fried chicken or something like that. First of all, peanut oil is very, very expensive. Secondly, the soybean oil, especially the high oleic, much lower in saturated fat. Peanut oil is fairly high in saturated fat, and it's one of the oils in that brochure, so you can see what some of the differences are. Peanut oil also imparts a bit of a flavor. Soybean oil flavor is just virtually totally neutral. It's very difficult to distinguish any oil flavor with soy. And peanut, you do pick up a bit of the peanut taste. We usually like that. You know, that's usually a good thing for us. But in most food manufacturers don't want the oil itself adding anything to their recipe. So they prefer other oils. But it's a very good oil. And many of those oils are. I think if I had to put my finger on the biggest advantage of soy is the availability and how economical it is, competitively priced. It does everything, now that we have high oleic, it does everything that most of the premium oils do without the added cost and difficulty of obtaining supplies. Those are good questions. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You said about the economic, about the soybean oil. I'm in Mexico and I'm seeing a lot of changes from soybean oils into palm oil, basically because of the economics, especially on the industrial side. Is that something you're seeing here as well in the United States, or is it just the more southern you go, or how do you see the industry moving into palm oil or other oils?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. Palm oil is a good substitute for a lot of the partially hydrogenated oil that we used to use. And when trans fats were required to be labeled in packaged food products and began to be regulated by certain municipalities like New York City, you couldn't use them in restaurants after a certain date. One of the replacements for that was palm oil. Palm provides a crystal structure, a solid structure that partially hydrogenated oils like partially hydrogenated soybean oil used to provide. The issue, there are a couple of issues with palm oil, and it isn't particularly priced. Palm is typically priced very competitively. Some food companies are concerned about sustainability issues, you know, what's happening to the orangutans in the rainforest and all that. And others are concerned about the real high saturated fat content. You can look in that table in the brochure you have and see how high the saturates are in palm. That gives it a really good functionality profile, but again, creates some potential labeling issues for the nutrition label on food products. But for some applications, from strictly functional standpoint, a very good oil. Any other questions? Good questions, very good. Yes, sir.
Is soybean oil GMO free?
There are GMO-free soybeans. The high oleic soybean oil is a product of genetic engineering. It was created through genetic engineering. 96% of all soybeans grown in North America are what some people term GMO, because they've been modified to be resistant to glyphosate herbicide. This is a herbicide that is relatively easy to use. It deteriorates very rapidly after it does the job it's intended to do. So it's been very effective. The high oleic trait was created through genetic engineering, not by injecting genes from a different crop or a different species, but by changing the way that the DNA functions as the soybean matures. Typically, the fatty acids are created in the soybean in sequence. First, the saturated fats, then the monounsaturated fats, and then the polyunsaturated fats. So if you interrupt that process after it's created a lot of monounsaturated fats, you then have a high oleic, high monounsaturated fat oil. So it stops the process. Yes, ma'am.
Secret recipe. It's buttermilk cake donut mix.
He won't tell me.
I-
He said he'd have to shoot me if
It's
he
like
told
the
me.
Colonel telling you what the 7 herbs and spices are, right? So could I get some voluntoads instead of volunteers?
Somebody want to try
You,
this?
sir.
Sure. He got some funny looking donuts.
This is the first time I've ever made donuts in a Fry Daddy.
This is the contraption he used to drop that donut dough down into the...
Yeah.
Soybeans have a natural tocopherol that canola and a lot of other oils, even palm, doesn't have. So you got that oxidative stability factor in there, as well as the fatty acid profile too. There's some of the folks that you know do par frying, a lot of par frying, are actively working with and testing the oil. Yep. Yeah, 375 is pretty moderate. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Sunflower oil? There are three kinds of, the question is, how does it compare to sunflower oil? There are really three kinds of sunflower oil. There's the old traditional type, then there was New Sun, and virtually the entire U.S. crop is New Sun, which is around 65% oleic. There's a high oleic sun that's real high oleic, like 75-80%. I think that's in the chart there. So it compares very favorably to the highest oleic sun and much has a much higher OSI than the New Sun product. So the one good thing about New Sun, the linolenic is like 1% or less. So that's a good thing. But the oleic level of the high oleic soy is so high that it outperforms. And it's got the tocopherols too that the Sun doesn't have. We just don't have enough. That's our challenge right now. Any other questions? Very good questions. Got more substance from the questions than you got from me initially. All right, anything else? Well, it's 4 o'clock. We got more donuts. We'll call it there. Todd and I'll be up here for a few minutes, so if you have any questions, please feel free to stop by. And again, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you.